Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would find myself in a very unenviable situation indeed. I have revealed on a previous real side experiences that from the personal self perspective, oftentimes what is visually presented on the real side can be somewhat incomprehensible. The personal self alone can only draw upon its current lifetime of experiences, physical level and real side, and in essence then, everything real side experienced can only be determined by the personal self as to its nature by utilizing the experiential references of the current lifetime it has available as comparison. Naturally then, there will be expressions of simulated life, creational position, and idea affected circumstance, far removed from the personal self's ability to comprehend, and in such instances, were I to attempt to apply literal interpretation, I tend to describe such a personal self in decipherable experiences as a pure nonsensical chaos. Only a chaotic to my personal self, however, but which would be understandable from the perspective of a personal self, of a being whose dimensional position, situation, or idea creation it was. As our consciousness, our personal self, will always be in accordance with our own little area of creation, the idea references we have will be those necessary for survival in our simulated position, or at least enough that we have an understanding and recognition of the simulation that is our creational placement. But to be afforded a view of a completely different dimensional position, one which is effected from an alternatively designed consciousness, so expected is it to be at odds with our own, and we may lack then the consciousness references to be able to determine everything that we are experiencing. Some idea effecting simulation will be relatively constant. We will be able to say, generally determine vehicles designed for transportation purposes, regardless of their appearances. And so, in certain instances, we can recognize a proportion of what we are experiencing. In other situations, practically everything may be indecipherable, all according to the real side experience, and where in multi-dimensional creation it's taking place, how far removed it is from our own physical level earth position, etc. Fortunately, we have the real awareness to fall back on. The real awareness, that which we all actually are, is a part of the isness, everything a true reality, and everything a position that is through all consciousness effected form and feature, and regardless of how indeterminable the simulated situation may appear, from the personal self-perspective, every idea of all consciousness that affects every creational happening will be available and recognized as to its nature by the real awareness, and the personal self will be afforded impressions as to what's taking place, amidst even the most nonsensical of our real side experiences, if it makes sense for the details and specifics to be known. As I said in the beginning, I was in a rather unenviable predicament. The vast bulk of the imagery comprising my situation incomprehensible to the personal self alone, but what could be determined visually was that I was in a dimensional position that was as though a realm of monstrous body forms with extreme ill-intended inclination. There are many creational areas and dimensions where the dark forces delight in relocating individuals to, generally places of torture, abuse, or fear-inducing, and for the purposes of displacing the individual, of putting them out of the way, individuals that rather have irritated the dark forces and in some way undermined their overall control dominion of the simulator, and this would be a similar situation. As I said, from the personal self-perspective, a very chaotic realm, the environment making little sense, but as I mentioned earlier, certain simulated creational features will be constant, even if differing in form and design. Body forms generally can be recognized as being such, despite how different they may appear in relation to the human body type. A chaotic realm teeming with monstrous and distorted body forms, all of an ill-intended persuasion, all dark force affiliated, and I would spend a portion of the night of real side experience defending myself from their relentless bombardment, as they sought to bestow harm upon me and ideally eradicate me. Only for the real awareness impressions did I determine the reason for this situation, that the dark forces had managed to displace me other-dimensionally into this nightmarish realm of chaos, amidst the various ill-intended and twisted dark force denizens, that's only objective was my destruction, due to my being evidently of annoyance to the dark forces, and their desire to perpetuate their control of the overall simulator unhindered. As I will always mention, no other being can bestow harm upon us, or impact our body form in any way, unless we agree that they can. For everything I experience is dependent on data-like files of information being installed in my consciousness. Ideas I either have created myself, or created by others I have agreed with. Absent of the idea, the cause, and no effect can follow, and should another being desire to destroy me, The idea of this destruction in relation to them must be installed in my consciousness, and potentially then, at any moment, the simulation of the idea can take place. Throughout our time in the simulator, so we have accumulated vast agreement in our consciousness, extended to all manner of body forms. And although each lifetime around we have no conscious realization of all our prior lifetime agreements, we are retained as their effects. For until we face and release the consciousness of ideas, we are the effect of its entirety, including all the agreements in relation to others, and whatever nature the agreements may take. Through whatever agreement idea installing means and mechanisms, many body forms will have the ability to harm or eliminate us, and can feature at any moment on the real side, potentially physical level also, but as we go through our awareness process, as this involves the facing and releasing of every idea of consciousness, we gradually are becoming less vulnerable to other body types, as we relinquish the agreements in relation to them that deny their ability to adversely impact our body forms. This would be the situation here, that despite the unceasing efforts of the twisted body forms assailing me, regardless of how powerful their body types were, they would be unable to carry out their objective, that of destroying me. As I said, absent of the idea and the simulation can't follow, and I seemingly had no agreements pertaining to their ability to bestow harm upon me, and thus was untouchable by them, able to fend them off with ease. Although this was a situation without end, and was becoming rather tiresome, and even though I was realistically in no peril, I still was contained in a dark force dimensional realm for the purposes of displacement. I would remove myself from the realm of chaos and monsters to find myself momentarily in my bedroom, though not entirely on the physical, more so a position bridging the real side and the physical level that I refer to as the in-between state. As everything we experience is based on agreement, this would include the situation I had been in, the realm of dark force chaos where I had been contained. Impressions were that I was not liberated from it, despite my being back in a position bridging between the real side and the physical. What was causing the in-between state would be my still being locked into the dark force containment realm. This would be the ongoing experience, were I to slip back fully onto the real side, but I had as though engineered the in-between state that allowed me a few moments to determine the ideas that were my dark force containment situation affected, and to release them. That although I was still fending off monsters on the real side in the chaos realm, I wouldn't have the view of it, but a view of the physical level instead, where my physical body form lay. Perhaps absent of the distraction of the monster battling, so was this a process of idea releasing that would unshackle me from such experience, easier to execute. For although the real awareness is rather taking care of the particulars, identifying and releasing the agreements, which allow the dark forces to displace me into the chaos realm, the personal self can interfere with the process. If it becomes, say, overwrought or emotionally invested, better to keep the personal self out of the equation, maintain the nowness of the real awareness position, and we can deal with any situation and eventuality. In this case, then, an induced in-between state that denied the personal self's ability to continue to experience the chaos realm, even though in reality it was still taking place. The view of my bedroom instead, while the agreement releasing was being undertaken. Impressions revealed that if this situation wasn't resolved, if the agreements that had allowed the dark forces to be able to displace me other dimensionally, however they were gleaned, were not released, the dark forces would not only retain me in the chaos realm on the real side, but I would be prevented from returning to the physical body form. This would in actuality present as though a forced and premature transition, or at the very least my awareness prevented from animating through the physical level form, in that it may remain in a perpetual comatose state perhaps, and absent of being able to return to my physical body, or if indeed on a demise of it, my real side position would be the chaos dark force realm. This was a situation the dark forces responsible were in the process of exacting during this particular night, but at the same time was my real awareness seeing to the releasing of the agreements that effected the ability of the dark forces to not only displace me other dimensionally, but to prevent my returning to the physical body. Ultimately, the dark forces would be denied, for in reality, as the deciders, they can do nothing unless we agree that they can. Consciously, we wouldn't permit such imposition, but always there is the greater bulk of agreement of the subconscious we are unaware of, and that must also be addressed, or we are retained as the unconscious effect of the entirety of it, including the ability of others to impose adversely, as was the case here. But through the ongoing process of awareness, of idea facing and releasing, not only are we rendered ever more so, beyond the ability of others to impact, but we are open to these agreements being released on the spot where it is necessary to do so, such as in this situation, where required was an immediate agreement severing, lest I be forcibly transitioned and trapped in a dark force chaos realm of containment. In an unrelated scene that followed, back onto the real side fully, but no longer within the chaos dark force containment position, I would be operating with a group of individuals that impressions revealed were those on their respective processes of awareness. And just as through agreements were I able to be subjected to containment as exacted by the dark forces, so another individual had been captured by the dark forces and similarly contained. That the dark forces, although delighting in intimidation, abuse, and elimination, do have a penchant for containing those they consider an annoyance. But just as agreement ensures such dark force imprisoned predicaments, so agreements can also facilitate rescue operations. As the architects of our experience, the ability and indeed extent that others can feature within them is strictly according to what we decide. Through the idea agreements we consciousness install, we lay out the movie sets and provide the roles others can assume in relation to ourselves. We literally must decide to be captured and imprisoned by the dark forces, or this cannot be our effected experience, and idea agreement installation can be attained through various means. Those that have established themselves in positions where they have the agreements, where they can impose adversely on a vast simulator scale, are generally more aware than most in regards to cause and effect creational mechanics, and how to have such agreements implanted that never would be consciously accepted. Realistically, the dark force imprisoned individual has but to relinquish the agreement pertaining to the experienced situation, to rearrange the movie set or rip up the script, but then it is generally through the unfaced and unrealized subconscious agreements that others have the ability to be more impacting, and until we do release the ideas of the subconscious, we always may be puzzled as to why we are the recipient of abuse, attack, and eradication. Oftentimes, we may be deployed to assist those just beginning their awareness processes, as they will have much by way of idea agreements to be released, including those extended to the dark forces that allow their adverse imposition, and the controllers will be swift to take advantage of these agreements before they are released to attack, destroy, or contain, and although perhaps resigned to such effects, that of being imprisoned by the dark forces, at least for that moment, should the contained individual decide and extend an agreement affording role that others can assume, that of a rescuer, then others can step into this role provided and intervene positively into the individual's dire circumstances. The extent of the intervention and the success dependent on the agreement parameters as set by the individual in question. This is a relative constant in regards to my real side experiences, that of accepting the provided role of a rescuer, of other stepping up and becoming more aware beings. The group and myself would have to battle our way through much by way of dark force resistance, again lacking agreements that our adversaries could harm us. Then, despite their attempts to do so, they would be unsuccessful, and this would express simulation-wise as the group and myself being in the forms of Jedi Knights. We would be wearing the kind of robes favoured by the Jedi in the Star Wars movies, and armed with the iconic lightsabers, as we forged our way through a sea of insectoid, reptilian, and human dark force characters, charged with preventing us from liberating the particular stepping up individual they were attempting to contain. The environment itself was a dark and forbidding planetary position, the surface of which, where we were mounting our rescue effort, comprising of stone predominantly, and as we proceeded through the hordes of dark force resistance, we would be gradually ascending as though a colossal series of stone steps, ultimately leading to a platform where the individual we sought to rescue was being held by still further monstrous creatures. We would reach the final platform, clambering up the final stone step, utilizing our nimble Jedi-like agility skills. We would secure the target, one who appeared human, though no impressions regarding his identity, and remove him from the contained position and from the clutches of the dark forces. The human had been safely relocated, all of the group had accompanied him, and I would now be alone in the experience, as though electing an alternative method of departure as opposed to just a fading from the scene, as the group and the human we rescued had done. For it seemed I was attempting to make a contact with another individual present in this dimension of darkness, and although he was operating in association with the dark forces positioned there, he showed indication of desiring to step up and become more aware. And so I would find myself deep underground, no longer being attacked by the hordes of dark force body forms as though I had escaped them, and there would be a sophisticated sci-fi-like train present which afforded transportation throughout a network of underground caverns that were beneath the surface. The caverns were festooned with still further dark force body types, insectoid, reptilians, and so forth, just as the surface had been, and although I made a contact with the dark force character who appeared human, he would betray me and attempt my destruction. I would nullify his efforts and clamber aboard the train, setting it in motion, as it not only would afford transportation through the network of caverns, but its termination point would be at a position where extraction from this planet would be possible, in whatever form that might take. As I said, I could simply have faded from the scene, but preferable was it to make the experience more entertaining seemingly. For the train would accelerate at a fair pace, but not fast enough that protection from the creatures, monsters, and body forms throughout the caverns it trundled through was assured, for it was an open train, not enclosed, and so any passenger was somewhat vulnerable, especially if they were not Dark Force affiliated. However, I would manifest as though laser weapons, mounting them on the carriage of the train I was sitting in, and this would be my means of defence. Again, if I have no agreements that these Dark Force body forms can harm me, as they attempt to, the experience will present as their inability, in whatever simulated way it might. In this case, by my repelling them with lasers. The train would begin to as though run out of power, and as it slowed, so was I being more effectively swarmed by the creatures in the caverns. But then a kind of raptor-like dinosaur would enter the scene, providing assistance. I would clamber onto its back, as it was quite sizable, and it would sprint through what caverns remained to be traversed, with me clinging to it, leaving the Dark Force denizens in our wake. The experience would end there, before I reached what impressions revealed would be my extraction point.